Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final meeting of the Public Policy Task Force. Before we begin, I would like to start with our land acknowledgement. Toronto, or Takaranto, as it was traditionally known, occupies a place that has been home to Indigenous peoples for over 15,000 years. The Huron-Wendat, Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the New Credit River. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty between the Anishinaabeg, Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share and protect this land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples and settlers from all over the world have been welcomed into this treaty in a spirit of peace and friendship and respect. Takaranto is now home for many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Recognizing where we stand is but one of many intentional acts for acknowledging injustices and committing ourselves individually and collectively as a university to the path of truth and reconciliation. As I said, this is the final meeting of the task force and the final meeting of the recommendations and priority setting phase. Within this phase, as everyone knows, we've been identifying our main findings, and Naomi and I have been working to finalize our recommendations with the goal of amplifying and strengthening Ryerson's public policy capacity and visibility and impact. Naomi, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Matthew. And for the last time, I'll offer you this housekeeping note that we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions and are available to assist you with any concerns or technical issues if they arise. So with regard to the agenda today, you'll have all received a draft of the report last week, which includes a summary of the main findings and the recommendations sections. We'll begin by focusing on a summary of the task force process thus far, as well as a discussion of the main findings of the draft report. The second item of focus for this meeting is the draft recommendations outlined within the report, as well as the examples and quotes document. Just to let you know that we have received some feedback and comments via email, and welcome additional comments by email if you wish, and also in addition to today's discussion. And finally, of course, we look forward to once again making the most of our time together today. So let me begin with an overview of the task force process. So the task force was created with some specific objectives in mind, including how we can increase Ryerson's capacity to inform policymaking and shape public policy dialogue, as well as to identify opportunities to amplify Ryerson's SRC excellence and policy expertise, particularly in a way that can be utilized to address complex problems and improve lives. During the past 6 months, we have collectively been learning about best practices and innovative models here at Ryerson, as well as at other universities in Canada and around the world. We've identified the following main findings that illuminate certain areas of strength and opportunity that Ryerson can continue to build upon. The theme of knowledge translation and mobilization has come up numerous times during our sessions. Our scans have shown that various institutions and initiatives are seeking to mobilize their expertise to connect with governments and the general public in public policy discussions. These efforts are ongoing at Ryerson, but it was recognized that adjustments can be made to ensure relevant findings are disseminated in a timely and accessible manner. Interdisciplinary collaboration is also key to facilitating creative and streamlined solutions to policy problems. Ryerson demonstrates strong interdisciplinary collaboration and integrates different disciplinary approaches within both its programs and research activities. Continued commitment towards supporting these kinds of interdisciplinary initiatives at Ryerson is integral to enhancing our research relationships across campus, and responds to comments from task force members that there is a desire to know what other researchers are working on across the university and what resources are available to scale opportunities for collaboration. The theme of community engagement was identified as one of Ryerson's key strengths and is seen as integral to our brand recognition as an institution. The university demonstrates a commitment to activism, community well-being, and community-based SRC initiatives. Over time, strong partnerships have been developed with a diverse range of community stakeholders to facilitate these research initiatives. However, it was recognized that we could do more to institutionalize community-based participation within the university. Strong partnership models emerged as a key theme in our findings, as partnerships are essential to increasing our policy visibility, relevance, and impact. Specifically, this involves how universities invest resources that make it easier for researchers and faculty to build partnerships and engage with government, as well as supporting students in finding employment opportunities and assisting faculty and research institutes with the ability to publish and communicate information. We know that there are rich and diverse partnerships that exist across the university, but there are ways in which we can support and bolster these collaborations. Another key finding for generating successful public policy programs involves student engagement and integration into projects and initiatives. The university features a strong commitment to enhancing the student experience and equipping students with the necessary skills and knowledge to join the workforce. It's recognized, though, that faculty and researchers also learn and benefit greatly from involving students. Students have valuable insights to share and the ability to anticipate future policy trends and issues. The principles of reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion were identified as a key theme that should provide the foundation of our SRC-driven public policy solutions. This will help support and amplify voices of underrepresented individuals and communities towards enhancing our public policy dialogue and decision-making. Although these principles are built into the commitments of SRC practices and the university more generally, more needs to be done to identify ways in which Ryerson can co-create new initiatives and deepen commitments to reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Identifying and building on strengths is another main finding to help enhance the university's public policy impact. An assessment of Ryerson's existing capacities, strengths, and networks helps ensure that limited resources are strategically invested into efforts that can advance Ryerson's SRC activities and public policy engagement. One final key finding involves creating visibility and driving impact by allocating resources towards the creation of policy relevant schools, think tanks, labs, and/or dedicated offices. Discussions have touched upon how different types of research and program delivery models, such as research centers and innovation hubs, can be utilized to amplify Ryerson's strengths. These public policy-driven units or initiatives may also help with coordinating activities across the university, as well as reducing administrative and transaction costs. So this concludes the overview of our main findings. And I'll now turn to Matthew to lead the discussion on the draft recommendations. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Naomi. So this is an opportunity for all of the task force members to comment on the findings and the recommendations. We think that the findings and recommendations are both heavily informed by our work so far, the conversations we've had, the survey we did, but particularly the external and internal scans as well, that revealed a lot of excellent practices within Ryerson, and also some models that we might be interested in pursuing that are being delivered elsewhere. So as you will see, if you've read through the document, the recommendations feature various strategies designed to amplify existing work and efforts here at Ryerson, as well as invest in and build new structures and invest in existing structures that can mobilize, integrate, and disseminate the work generated by Ryerson faculty and affiliated centers and initiatives. So with that, I think this is an opportunity for you to weigh in on the findings and recommendations. There are 5 questions that we have posted there. but I'd say it's probably 4 discussions. I mean, we'll see how the conversation unfolds. But I think first what I'd like to do is combine those first 2 questions. I'm editing my work. I wrote the 2 questions, but I'm combining them now as I speak. So those first 2 questions are really about whether the findings are an accurate reflection of our discussion, and whether we think there is anything that we've missed, things that we have said that we found that you think are inappropriate or that we didn't find, or anything that is missing. Then I'd like to move into a discussion on the recommendations. Then if you've had a chance, we can talk about the examples and quotes document, which I think is an important supporting document that will give examples for the kinds of things we're talking about and provide an additional narrative flow to the document. And then we'll have a final few minutes if anyone has any final strategic input about the release of the report and the recommendations. So with that, I will open it up. I'm just changing my view here so I can see everyone's smiling face. Raise your hand or signal, and this is an opportunity to talk about those findings and whether people think that's accurate or whether they want to add anything. And I assume if I don't see anyone, it's because everyone found them brilliant. We were just summarizing your work, so of course. Roxana, yes.
Hi. Yeah, and first of all, I wanted to really thank Naomi, Monica, yourselves for really putting together this fantastic report. I have sent you some comments via email, but I thought, I'm going to reiterate some of them here for the group for a discussion. So I really loved particularly the first part of this report. I thought you did a really fantastic job summarizing the discussion that we've had here. I think my main point on the discussion around or on the representation of our discussion was the word interdisciplinary. And I just wanted to put that to the group here because I was thinking, we've talked a lot about bridging disciplinary gaps and bringing in more people from various faculties, not just, different departments, for example, within the policy world. And so I was wondering whether we actually shouldn't be going for transdisciplinary at this point, which is what a lot of the scientific literature, when it really comes to engaging, natural science, social science, arts, all of that together, what they are usually using. So that was just, it was just something that reading it, I was wondering whether interdisciplinary was really even strong enough for what we're really proposing here.
So thank you for that, Roxana, and I'm happy to pursue that conversation with members. So I saw your comments, and I thought that was quite helpful because we had intended to write it, with a very strong focus on integrating across disciplines and departments, but it may not have come through sufficiently enough. And the transdisciplinary word is actually one that I'd never heard before. So I apologize for that. But I'm happy to, explore that language more if people want to. But that was certainly the intent.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is actually, it's one of the questions there. If this is something that maybe isn't as known, I might be in a kind of bubble there. Then maybe interdisciplinary is the more, useful term, just because people might just, actually relate it to what we want to say. Well, but I thought I'm just going to put it out here.
We can use both and explain it, and everyone's in their own bubble. I was in Ottawa for 4 years, so I was in the biggest bubble of all. Kareem.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you. I'll pick up on one of Roxanne's points in a minute. So it feels like this report is an accurate reflection of the discussions, and in particular, the gathering of the strengths into theme areas is a tough thing to do, but it feels like you and Naomi, and with the support of Monica and Chloe and others, have managed to do that quite well. I would add, I endorse the draft recommendations. I think in particular the argument for a new kind of policy school is a strong one, and I believe that one that, it's funny, Roxana mentioned the transdisciplinarity. The policy schools that I've seen out there tend to draw from, oh, we're multidisciplinary because we draw from political science and economics. And I think that there's I think pulling on the full set of strengths at Ryerson towards such an entity would be quite exciting and interesting. In particular, I believe there's an opportunity that maybe could be elevated in the report, no matter the way that this work is organized, around kind of the rapid learning skilling space that people who are doing public work and public policy work could find interesting at Ryerson. I believe there's a big opportunity there, given the constituencies that are looking for that learning, and typically, at least on the public service side or the senior broader public service side, would only get that from a very expensive Ivy program, a very selective, very expensive Ivy program. And so the prospect of being able to offer that kind of skilling or reskilling through a policy entity is I think is there and is interesting, and could be supported by many of the people on this call and more broadly in the community. And finally, I would just say, in terms of the strategic input on the report and final suggestions, I believe this is these entities and these conversations have to have a long-lasting nature to them. They have to exist they have to be relevant in contexts that change over time. But I would just point out that the circumstances of the last year have pointed out have shown the urgency for well-organized work in this space towards solving public problems, and therefore I would urge, in terms of strategic orientation, that an action orientation around this work more generally is one that we should take, and therefore I hope this task force report, I hope the report advised by the task force will urge just the opportunities for action in the nearer term, because those opportunities are there and are the public and public institutions, I think, need them of us. Those are some observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kareem. So I have Anna, then Ron, then Roxana again.
Okay, yeah, I was about to ask. Yeah, but well, thank you all. First of all, yeah, thanks to Monica and Natalie, but also, of course, to Naomi and Matthew, and everyone else of APRI who has done this huge task of putting this together and summarizing our often probably incoherent and inconclusive discussions. I really liked it very much. My only comment was whether we could somewhere inject a small reference about what we discussed, the international collaborations. Of course, a public policy school would certainly be more focused on Canada, the federal level, but also I would think the provincial and the municipal. But certainly there is scope. Canada is a leader in many areas, and there would be scope to, to think internationally. And the other thing that I wanted to ask more in terms of our self-reflection, so how do we exactly see the school positioned next to the different faculties and departments? How we will make sure that we, don't duplicate the work, but rather divide it? I don't know if you had, maybe it is a little bit premature because we are at the planning stage, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
So Anna, let me just pick up on those 2 points and then go to Ron and Roxana. We have all been through a number of writing processes, and you see your text and draft, and then someone says, well, how come you didn't mention X or Y? And you realize, oh, I meant to mention X or Y. So the international piece is a good flag. I think it's probably there in a couple of places, but it certainly should be more prominent because I think that there are a number of areas at Ryerson where, as you say, international collaboration, global networks have become more important, and an international focus is one that, from my perspective, Ryerson is devoting more resources towards. So I very much we'll go back and see how we can buttress that. I mean, I'm happy to hear on the second piece, as we've said throughout. I mean, we've got a task force informing Naomi and my and Naomi's final report with recommendations, but we're not a decision-making body. Obviously, the task force isn't, but Naomi and I aren't either. You know, a lot of the things we talk about have resource implications, have approval processes. There would be internal stakeholders that one would want to talk to. So I do think it's a little bit early, but I think both Naomi and I would be very interested in people's views on how to ensure that, you know, we're not duplicating. I mean, there are lots of examples about how nimble, agile, forward-looking schools can integrate from across. And I think Kareem's point that many of them tend to integrate across a small number of arts departments rather than broader in terms of business and design and science and engineering, and many of the areas where I think Ryerson is super strong in. And there are lots of emerging models where you know, students get expertise or training in public policy, but that builds on top of a particular focus on engineering or business or design or a particular area, and then goes out into the world with disciplinary knowledge in, say, engineering, but also a good background in public policy and governance, which become very attractive, you know, students, particularly those who've had co-op and work integrated learning experiences before in those areas. So I think there's lots of you know, models and planning and discussion to have. And again, no one has approved anything. So we'd be very interested to hear views on these things. And I don't know if you want to pick up on that, Anna, before we go down the speakers list.
No, yeah, I totally hear you. Yeah, maybe I was just, for instance, yeah, Kareem's point is partly kind of an answer to my question as to, for instance, you know, mobilizing those parts that are not traditionally linked to a public policy school. It was just, I mean, I was just thinking that Ryerson has many parts that are directly policy looking. I'm thinking, for instance, of the Diversity Institute and the way it does the research, and then Wendy's here. I'm thinking of Cherise and the city building program. So how to make sure this public policy school does not overlap with what is already done, but rather goes up a gear.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Anna. So on the list, Ron, then Roxana, and I see Frank. And Wendy, okay.
Yeah, so thanks. So I mean, I go back and forth on this. I mean, on the one hand, over the years, I myself have thought, shouldn't we have a school? And I've discussed this and sort of proposed it at various times in different ways. But you know, I also get nervous. I don't know what it means to have a task force report that sort of endorses we have a school policy, but then there's no discussion of the relationship between academic programs and the school. And I don't like to sort of just do a blanket endorsement because I don't know what the end product will be. And I don't know that the stakeholders will be at the table when the decisions are made about what that looks like. So it's sort of with potentially excitement, the possibility of all sorts of wonderful things happening, and even potential resources that might be made available, with fear of what does this mean? What's this mean in reality? How do academic programs? two critically core programs. I don't know how you have a school of policy without the PhD in policy and without the MPPA in policy somehow having a formal relationship with that school. So to me, some of that needs to be, if there can't be an answer, it at least needs to be acknowledged that this needs to be part of a future discussion in the handoff, and that there be some indication in the task force recommendation or report or handoff that this kind of a decision needs to be undertaken in a way that does bring those stakeholders to the table. I recognize, I'm not saying everybody has a veto point or you can't do it if I don't like exactly how you do it, but some mechanism where we ensure that the right people get around the table for these discussions and about what would this look like and how can this be done in a way that, to use an overused phrase, is a win-win for everybody and not a net negative or undermines. And also, we don't want too many things running around with the same names, right? If we have a school of policy, but the academic programs don't have a formal relationship to it, that can be awfully confusing. Or is the new school then going to create new degree programs? Does it have degree capacity? So I'd like to see a little bit of language, at least that provides some parameters about what a future discussion needs to entail and where that discussion should occur. You know, who are we handing this report off to and what are the next steps if we were to do anything? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Ron, I think though that's those are great comments, and I think we can incorporate that. This is you know, a draft, and I think that question about stakeholder engagement and process around handoff, you know, would be really useful, because like you, Ron, as you said, like, and I've been in several academic institutions previously and in government looking to engage with academic institutions on a number of occasions. Like you are, you're quite right that we need to figure out what that process would look like. Just because there might be a little bit of a need doesn't necessarily mean that that any solution will respond to that need. So we have to figure out what that process is and that handoff, and we can certainly add more language around that, Ron, to make sure people are comfortable that there's another discussion going on. Roxana, Anna, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if that's from previously. And Roxana, I think that's a new hand, right? Yeah, so Roxana, then Frank, then Charisse, then, oh, no, sorry. Wendy had her hand up previously. Let me just summarize again. Roxana, then Frank, then Wendy, then Charisse, then Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you. Just since, yeah, following up on what Karim and Anna and Ron to an extent also were saying on this proposed School of Public Policy, because that was, quite frankly, when I was first reading that part in the report, I found it was a disconnect from the first part of the report, where there was a lot of talk about integrating disciplines, integrating different faculties into something that, you know, in the different stakeholders and so on. But then the name Public Policy School, for me as a, you know, natural scientist, rang as a completely disciplinary thing that I would not see myself represented in. Like I would not see any of my students signing up to be members of that school. And so my first question then was, how can we, you know, either name this differently to make it more accessible for a wider group and more representative of this diversity and of this interdisciplinarity that we, or transdisciplinarity that we want to represent. You know, things like, you know, I was just, you know, brainstorming for myself a couple of things, thinking, oh, couldn't we call it something like transdisciplinary science diplomacy, or, you know, bridging science and policy, public policy, or something that just draws in a more diverse group of people who do not feel like, oh, they have to have a background, you know, their PhD in policy or something, because you know, this was one of the discussions, or some of the discussions we had as well, was that a lot of people who do actually policy relevant work might just not think of their work as public policy work, even though it informs so much of public policy. And I think with the name of School of Public Policy, we will again create a barrier for these people. And so that was something where I was also thinking that within that text, if we were to, propose a school like that, and to see, how do we create how do we distinguish this from existing initiatives and so on, it should, I think, also be more explicit in there that this would be an initiative to a truly interdisciplinary institute that brings in researchers who impact public policy, and drawing from all of these different creative and research capabilities, rather than saying, okay, we have another group of people researching public policy development, but that this is really something else. And I think that should be reflected in the description, in the document, as well as in the name. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxana. Frank?
Thanks, sorry. First of all, I wanted to express my appreciation for the document. So to Chloe and Natalie and Monica, and to the co-chairs, very well written, very well reasoned, lots of great arguments, and well positioned as a conceptual piece. And that's where I wanted to start. Considering this as a conceptual piece, what would we see as the natural next steps? And I guess this is building a little bit on what Ron was saying, in terms of fleshing out the concepts into a more detailed analysis that decision makers would need to make an informed decision on such an important matter. And what I mean by that is probably specifically with the core recommendation of creating a new public policy school and integrated research center. Again, lots of very wonderful and exciting ideas, I have to say. But what would that look like in terms of a new Ryerson public policy ecosystem in practical terms? So things like organizational structure and governance, roles and responsibilities that go to mandate, funding sources and sharing, all of those things. So again, the arguments are quite strong, but how do we make sure that we can have insight into the benefits being realized, and so that it's done in a way that complements, as is intended, I think, all the great things that are already happening at Ryerson in this ecosystem. So testing things like the assumptions that we have in there, we talk about, we make statements about economies of scale being realized, that sort of thing. So how do we present information that gives decision makers comfort around that? So I'm thinking, for example, could we articulate a straw operating model, or can we have a proof of concept type of phase as kind of the next stage to be able to put some meat on the bones of that? Those are my main thoughts. But again, very well written, very exciting concept.
Thank you, Frank. You're right, as are some others who spoke, that we have not done a fully fleshed out business case, governance, funding intersection with existing departments at this stage. And so I would be very interested in people's views, or your views, on whether a straw operating model at this point is something that we should be working on, or other suggestions on what, as Ron said, what a handoff might look like to an additional process. I think Wendy was next.
Sure. So I won't echo what was, I won't repeat what was already said about this being, having been a useful exercise in terms of mapping who's doing what. I find a complete disconnect between, and I did miss the last meeting, but I do find a complete disconnect between the sort of analysis of the kind of scan and the analysis of the opportunity and the issues, and the recommendation, frankly, of the need for a new public policy school. Like, unless that was the agenda coming into this, and we just didn't know. I thought the focus was more on research and knowledge mobilization and how we can engage externally. And perhaps it's a function of, you know, some of us who have been around for a long time and involved in, you know, standards and academic council and so on, just understanding the processes at the university. But a school is an academic unit. It isn't something that, you know, the vice president of research and innovation, if there was, that was sort of the intention, to look at a new academic unit, then in my mind, it would have been something that you would, you know, you would have had the provost and that whole collection of folks involved in. And it may be, again, that Ryerson's structure and policies around centers and so on are very different than what you see at U of T and other places where centers can operate academic programs and so on. But to me, there's a huge disconnect, and it's just, given how this has unfolded, if you had more of the core academic administrators at this table, I think their heads would be exploding at the idea that this group is making a recommendation around a new school. So my, you know, not to kind of drive a stake through the heart of the report, what you might want to recommend, and I know Avner has lots of experience with this in terms of, you know, we created a law center, research center, and that built some critical mass. And then eventually his baby turned into a law school. But my very strong recommendation would be, you don't make a recommendation in the report that we are suggesting that a new school be created. You might want to put something in that says, we're going to look at the feasibility. So that would be one thing. And the other thing, and this is, you know, doesn't need to go into the report, and it's maybe something more for Naomi to be thinking about, is I would argue, as someone who does quite a lot of policy related research that's, for example, ended up in the recent budget, that one of the things that would have been really helpful is to look at existing Ryerson policies and practices around things like overhead and REB, and making sure that they are more responsive to the needs of policy processes. Because, for example, if you're doing a consultation, which is not the same as doing a survey, the way in which REB responds to that is not necessarily timely. And often these opportunities come and go. And similarly, the overhead policy, you know, if you've got someone coming and saying, we want you to facilitate a process, and the starting point is VPRI wants 40% markup, that creates a real impediment to getting engaged in some of the opportunities. So those would be two really strong points that I would make. I would certainly not be prepared to sign anything that suggests that this process has led to the recommendation of the development of a new school academic unit. Happy to think about, you know, a research institute or something else.
Thank you, Wendy. And just so that's very, very helpful and useful, and certainly something that we've been considering or wrestling with. Certainly not sure about what the right structure is, and that relates to comments that others have made as well. And obviously a new law school or a new medical school or others have a lot of decision making and process around them, and it can take a while to get there. I do think that there is you know, a need for the kind of institution that we are talking about, and you've referred to perhaps a research center, think tank. So we'll continue to work through those, and that's very useful and important feedback. I would note, just to be clear though, that at the end of the day, we're not trying to get a report that 30 people sign off on. That isn't what we're trying to do. That would be, as you know, very hard, and you would end up with you know, a watered down report if everyone has to sign off. So I mean, this was structured for Wendy and I to, sorry, Naomi and I to issue recommendations, and ideally they are highly reflective of all of the input we've received. So let's take this away over the next week and see what we can do with it. Charisse, thank you, Wendy.
Hey, so I thought the report was really great. I have to admit that I've mostly skimmed it, and so please forgive if these comments miss the mark. I will look at it in more detail. I was extremely busy when it came into my inbox. So I think just echo some of the points we heard, that like throughout this process, one of the things that, like, for somebody who's my 25-year career has been working on policy, so hearing you know, a lot of people on this task force, and through the work that you did in your analyses of consultations, that they're looking for a way to translate their research or mobilize their research into policy, public policy that can make a difference in to policymakers, to the conversation, and that within their respective departments or faculties, there just isn't the support system or the infrastructure to help do that, right? It's kind of left up to the faculty to try and figure out, okay, I've done all this research, how do I translate it? Or even become aware of policy that relates to what I'm doing. So I think having an, you know, I'm agnostic on whether a new institute is created or not, but just to make sure that it doesn't sort of not duplicate, but like is additional in a way to what everybody is striving to achieve, and then sets its own priorities and its own agenda for policy, rather than trying to leverage the existing research and translate that into policy. So I think that it can have a really like important role in being collaborative and being supportive of the research that's underway, and ensuring that it serves the role, that the gap that exists, the gap that it sounds like a lot of researchers are having in translating their work into policy. And then a new institute could have that supportive role. I think that the other questions I have, and they may be in the report, are how to reconcile timely policy response versus long-term academic work. Like, is there a role for this entity to be able to find that middle ground? And will there be staff that can, who aren't, you know, knee deep in their own academic research, that can be nimble and help to translate research that exists, or can be responsive? Like, so for example, the federal budget comes along, you know, academics are really busy doing their research, but this institute could sort of wrangle everybody and say, hey, here are the things in the budget, we've done some analysis that pertain to what you're doing. Would you like to have some support in a, you know, a letter or a submission or something that we're doing collectively through this institute? And, you know, I think it would be really, like, I look at the work that I'm doing at City Building Ryerson. So those of you who don't know, prior to City Building Ryerson, we had the City Building Institute, which was a well-staffed policy think tank, and it was shut down because it wasn't academic enough. So now I'm looking at the work that we're trying to do and mobilize academics who are doing city building or urban related work, but we don't have the staff to do the policy translation. That's gone. So this is an example of, we have these different areas that are doing work or trying to harness academic work, and we need a public policy institute to put the work into that policy relevant outcome that can come from the work that's already taking place.
Thank you, Cerise. I know we've kind of, just so we know, we've got about 15 minutes left for our discussion, and we've kind of blended all of the discussion questions together, and that's fine. So before I go to Carolyn, I just wanted to highlight that if we do run out of time, people should feel free to email Naomi and me over the next week. In particular, we haven't engaged with the examples and quotes document. And so I'd encourage people to take a look at that and make sure that if there's stuff that they think is inappropriate or would like to add to that and highlight, feel free to communicate with us via email. Carolyn.
Thank you, Matthew, and thanks to the team for the report. I've read it and I really enjoyed reading it. It's there's a lot of exciting opportunities and recommendations that I've given thought to in the past, and if some of these things could come to be, I think they would benefit the university greatly. A couple of things. I think I like the student focus. I think we should really keep our eye on the student focus in all this, because that's where a lot of benefits flow. In addition to faculty research, I think student opportunities for experiential connections in the world of policy are a phenomenal aspect of the report. I think the external facing capacity building is really, really exciting and important. Just the time to build relationships externally is really critical. And I think if there's any capacity that can be built on that front, it would benefit, you know, faculty members, programs, students, and so I think that's an exciting element. I'm not going to repeat some of the disconnects that others have noted, but I clearly noted that there's a bit of a disconnect between what's in the report and the existing programs and centers. I think that was all documented very well in the internal scan that you did, but then it seems to get lost in the report a bit. As you know, and others have mentioned already, there are, you know, certificates, 2 undergraduate degrees, a graduate degree, a PhD degree, minors, concentration. So there's lots of existing academic programs that need to be braided in, I would say, into the report. And I also echo the comments that Frank tabled about a bit more on kind of what resources this kind of vision or the recommendations might require in terms of people and funding and those kinds of things. I liked Sharice's comments about kind of the focus of a kind of a think tank component in the report. It's called different things, so we may want to have a consistency there. So throughout the report, sometimes it's referred to as a integrated public policy research center. At one point, a policy ideas lab, a hub for public deliberation, and then the think tank. So maybe we kind of land on one of those as a consistent label for what you envision there. And I piggyback on Sharice's comments about, you know, what that would be in terms of providing this kind of external facing capacity. And I think there is a lot of potential there. And it would benefit many of us in core public policy programs, if you want to call us that. Also, many centers across the university. So I think there's really a lot of potential there. But as Don Abelson has a new book out on think tanks, if you haven't read it, I think it's a great read, because it talks about how the think tank landscape has changed fundamentally in this kind of crowded marketplace of ideas, and what does the university offer that's different from more highly politicized think tanks. And I think there needs to be a lot more thought about that. Thank you again, and I will provide written comments in addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I won't engage with all of that, and I want to make sure others have a chance, but just to pick up on a couple of points, we will take a look at Dawn's book, which I haven't looked at. And as I said, and Naomi and I said earlier, this is a draft. And so we'll work on language and getting some consistency of language and those kinds of things. I do want to just highlight, your first point. We've struggled with that. So we have the internal and external scan, and those documents are part of the work of the task force and will be part of the report. And we imagine releasing it online, so it's not a physical copy, but they will be part of the website and part of the report and thought of as part of the report. But as you know, we kind of struggle with how much detail to go into in terms of all of the existing internal pieces that are going on, balanced with a report that's kind of shorter and punchier. So we're still struggling with that. And, Naomi and I will land over the next few weeks about how we try and balance that. I'll just say that that's a struggle and we're trying to balance it. And it's not that we're trying to exclude things, but we also don't want a 200-page report. So we'll try and get that right. Avner.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say that I also share that feeling of disconnect when I read the report between the two parts and the recommendation. I'm not going to repeat everything that Wendy said, but I don't think the first part is very well connected to the second part. In fact, when I read the first part, I thought it was actually too cautious if that's what you want to do. If you want to create something new, and we have been creating new things like the law school that Wendy mentioned, now perhaps the medical school that Stephen is leading a committee on. So first of all, then to Wendy's point, there is that process of like you establish these committees and you go about, and that's sort of how you go about doing that, right? But I think also when I read the first part, it was almost like we have to just like sort of keep building what we have. And that sort of didn't lead me to sort of the reflection of that we really need something new, right? So I think there's a bit of we need to somehow, if that's ultimately what you want to recommend, then I didn't see it coming. And unlike Wendy, I think I've been into all the meetings. So I think my reaction was when I read it, I said, okay, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming. I don't recall having like, fulsome discussions over it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you might want to, reflect a little bit about that. That sort of takes me to the other point, which is in terms of the structure of this task force. I don't think it would be great if it just came out ultimately as a report that just the two of you are writing, and that we sort of, some of us are like, have our opinions, this, that, or the other. I think it's possible to create a report that is on behalf of all the committees. Certainly the way it's written now, I don't think it's sort of very clear that it's only coming from the two of you. And I don't know why it has to come from the two of you. I think, Wendy made a few suggestions in terms of like, perhaps how to call this next phase in terms of public policy at Ryerson. Does it have to be called the school? Does it have to be other things? But you have a dean here, you have Carolyn, who just spoke, you have Ron, you have all these people that I guess could go away and have some kind of conversation how to sort of best do that. I certainly, having been involved in like when you said it was a bit of our baby, the law school, didn't like sort of, would want people to sort of listen to me, like, and to others like me that were sort of preoccupied with that. And I imagine that the people that have been doing public policy for some time at Ryerson as a discipline would also want to have some kind of conversation about like what would be the next steps. So I hope that there is a way to create a report that is actually reflective of everything, including some of these things that we know to do, which is just to criticize, and come out with something that ultimately I think everybody would be supportive of. So I just wanted to add that, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Avner. That's super helpful, and it may be possible to do that. So let's take away that advice. Anyone else? Final comments? And again, I think Avner, Wendy, those are Frank, others. Those are all very useful comments, and Naomi and I will take that away and see how we can reflect that and bridge the disconnect a bit and loop back with some of you. Seeing no other.
No, Pam has a comment.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Pam.
So I've been listening to all of you, and I think I don't want to echo what's already been said. And I certainly take note of what the Faculty of Arts people, faculty members here have said. I did have many of the same questions, specifically about an administrative structure and the relationships between the various individuals and units, and academic units and other units within the university, and questions about resources. What I think I would like to do is, and I've told this to some people around this virtual screen, is to have an art specific meeting so that we can talk about our priorities and our strengths, and we come from we view all of this from an academic lens. It's not a narrow academic lens, so that's what I'd like to do, and then bring it back to the wider group.
Okay, that's obviously that's great. Maybe I'll follow up with you and just make sure that whatever language we use is reflective of the fact that there are additional processes that people are engaging with, and that there are findings, and then there are processes and conversations going on now to see how to move that forward. So that's helpful, and I'll loop back with some of you to make sure that as Naomi and I articulate some of this language, next steps, and our advice, that we're reflecting those considerations. Thanks, Pam. That's helpful. So I think this wraps up this part of the discussion. Again, just to reiterate.
Matthew,
Yep.
I think Samir had his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, no, I've been listening quite closely, and I think my only concern, just kind of, and again, not wanting to echo the comments, is that, again, to where this report is going, I like the idea of having a report that reflects our collective opinion, knowing that, it's not that everybody has to agree on the actual outcome, but I think it's more powerful to the university to say to someone like Stephen or others, this is actually, like, there's a need to do something better here. There's a lot of great talent. We've got a lot of things, there's some barriers we've identified. There's a real opportunity. I guess, if I'm a bit worried that if it comes out as, not being based as the voice of many, but of some, then is there the risk as well of us kind of getting nowhere, because people say, oh, is it school of public policy or nothing? Well, clearly it's easier just to do nothing and have the status quo. And I don't think that's what anybody wants. That might be the end goals we talked about, law center becomes law school, those sorts of things. But I think, the goal is, we're all in this game. We want to kind of move this forward. And I think, helping to, because I think someone raised a nice point about saying, what is the, when every university has a school of public policy or a think tank or whatever, like, truly, what is the value proposition? What are we doing so fundamentally different than just being like everybody else? And is that the point to start with? Because, again, this is when, I think, the folks that do the important work will start looking at market differential, can we sell positions in this, all these sorts of things, like from a fundraising standpoint, from a recruitment standpoint, what is so unique and different? And that's kind of the messaging around the law school, the medical school, those sorts of things. And I don't know if we're there yet, but I think where we are in agreement as a group is there's a tremendous amount of good work here. We really think that we can do better as a university to really leverage that. And my only fear is that if I was in charge and someone came to me and said, School of Public Policy, I'm like, nope, okay, next, right? As opposed to, oh, there's actually something that we can do in year 1 to 2. And maybe it's a way to point to, this may lead in 5 years' time to a conversation around the School of Public Policy, but here are the things we can do year 1, year 2, year 3, that we think are immediate barriers, and how do we get ourselves potentially on a path that could lead there, but all these other good things that could happen. So that's just wanted to reinforce some of that, but great work so far.
That's great, Samir. That's super advice. So that's very helpful. I've done it twice now. I cut it off when there were people trying to get in. I'm just looking. No, I don't see anyone else. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Stephen, who began us on our journey. And Stephen, over to you.
Great. Well, good to see all of you. And I just wanted to say, having just heard the last 15 minutes of conversation, how excited I am to see the final report, and just very, excited, but also feel energized through the energy and enthusiasm and the seriousness that you've taken this exercise and where you are today, and guiding the final report as I look forward to receiving. So, so first off, I just want to just say that to both Matthew and Naomi, a tremendous thank you for co-chairing and guiding this this task force, and your commitment and dedication that have helped realize the potential of the Ryerson community and illuminated the incredible work that is occurring across the university every day. When we set out to think about policy, in one regard, it was also looking at, what lies out there in terms of gaps, and frankly, and how government appears to be broken these days with respect to, significant gaps in evidence, or the access to the type of conversations and expertise needed to fill these very big policy questions, and that government is dealing with at this very moment. And so from a university perspective, harnessing the constellation of activities and doing it better, right? We have tremendous assets, as you've all realized and have acknowledged and have indicated, as I've heard just in the last few minutes, and we recognize that as well. So this is really a tremendous opportunity for the university, and the work of all of you for your ongoing participation and contributions to this exercise has been very, very important. It was important at the start that this committee be established with the right voices and right people to engage in a unique moment to better understand the ways in which Ryerson can expand and amplify our policy impact. And for my view, it's not only that we stand to benefit from the work that you do, but I hope that this was an experience for you that was worthwhile, productive, and fulfilling, as well as perhaps establishing new connections across the university that will be helpful to all of us and to yourselves as you move forward. The windows and doors that were open to the process, and the way in which you guided your deliberations through the many guests, and looking at the world externally and internally is very important to the success of the consultation process, and your involvement, bringing unique perspectives to specific questions and ensuring that we've had a diverse range of voices and an inclusive process informing the work of the task force. And particularly with respect to thinking about inclusivity and the future leadership in our public policy work, it's clear that there's been far too many underrepresented and unheard voices coming from our campus, and creating the pathways and amplifying those voices is a particularly important outcome that we hope that this will achieve. So as you're acutely aware, we're all living in unique and unprecedented times. And frankly, this is an initiative I think it is very, very timely. And as we'll discover in months that will follow, we're not the only organization or institution that's really thinking differently about how we might harness the significant capacities and expertise to better position policy framing in government. And there's a real void, to be perfectly honest. And it says something about the existing schools of policy. It says something about the way in which perhaps our policy work at our institutions are framed. But I think, though, we have been also leading the way too in fulfilling some of those gaps even in the last year and a bit. And so very thankful for Matthew to show interest enough to come to Ryerson following his time at the in Ottawa at the Privy Council, and of course drawing on his range of expertise and experiences to come to Ryerson. And thinking back to our earliest conversations about the work that we thought we could do here, and of course with Naomi's leadership as well, that we've been, I think, moving the RSTIC quite a long way, and want to applaud the work of not only Matthew, but Kareem and Sean Mullen, particularly around the first response policy work, and looking at the pandemic and post-pandemic transitions. And of course, we have tremendous leadership at so many different levels, and as highlighted by Charisse and some around city building, and harnessing all of that together is really, really important. And it couldn't come at a better time. You all have been, really very important contributors to this process, and hope that will continue going forward. The presence of impactful public policy related initiatives happening across universities would inspire this initiative, and sparking the question, how can we amplify our impact and do even more? And from what I've seen, I'm very, very pleased to see the progress. And of course, only got a glimmer of what's been going on, and seeing just some of the features at the edges of what the draft report might be saying. And I really look forward to receiving that report when it's finalized. So we are a globally connected city university, and it's in a unique position to expand upon its SRC activities. And we're uniquely positioned with respect to our thematic focus and in areas of scaling and accelerating, particularly on the most important problems and challenges and opportunities. Positions Ryerson, I think, at the forefront of public policy impacts and in areas of particular strength that Ryerson can play. And I was draw on this on our own university's response over the pandemic. When I contrast that to other universities in Ontario and across Canada, and I was really struck by the range and depth and breadth of expertise, and revealing many strengths that wasn't always apparent to us, just in the way we've been responding from an SRC's perspective, and our researchers' work really being at the forefront of many of the things that are going on at this very point in time. Your conversations have certainly touched upon inclusivity and interdisciplinary collaboration. Collaboration is really critical. It's so important. And I think there's also new ways in which intersectionality across different areas of expertise and even issues where public policy is concerned. When I think about cities, I think about immigration, or I think about health. And I know in individual conversations I've had with Anna, Charisse, and others, I mean, there's real opportunities to bring all those things together. Aging population is reflected in National Institute of Aging work and some as efforts there. And so how do you link and bring all those things together in meaningful ways? And so, stepping outside of our disciplines, our respective areas, and harnessing that constellation. I've heard the term weaving or braiding together, and we've got to do a better job to harness that. And I think we have all the assets to be able to really make a mark and going forward. So by exploring best practice initiatives that are being driven by external institutions, we can also identify gaps and opportunities for Ryerson as well, and hope there's been some aspects of learnings from some of that external scanning and research that was undertaken. So again, looking forward to receiving the final report and recommendations in the next number of weeks. And I no doubt, I believe it has exceeded my expectations when I hear the voices around the table just in the last moments, and just through the updates that I have with Matthew and Naomi, and I know it will stand as an invaluable resource how we can continue the trajectory of excellence and continue to make a positive impact. So thank you so much again for the opportunity to be able to share these words with you, and I'll just turn it back to Naomi and Matthew. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us today, and also thank you for creating this initiative and opportunity for us to participate in this necessary and truly engaging exercise.
Thank you.
So this concludes the final meeting of the Public Policy Task Force. We will take away the remarks and feedbacks, rich feedback that we got today with thanks from you as members, and build this into our final report. We'll be sharing a final draft with you towards the end of May, but in the interim, please feel free to reach out to us at any time prior to that if you'd like to provide additional comments for consideration, or if you have any outstanding questions. Just turn it over to Matthew now for final remarks.
I just want to echo that. Thank you to Stephen for launching this and asking me to be involved. I've learned a great deal. Also, thank you to everyone who's participated. I know this has been a large time commitment, both in terms of meetings and reviewing various pieces. And it's taking place at a time when everyone is on Zoom quite enough. And so I know all of you are engaged in all kinds of ways in your communities and research and public policy. So thank you for sharing some of your time and expertise with us. I definitely took a lot of notes today. And so Naomi and I'll chat and think about how to reflect that properly. I mean, I take Avner's point and Samir's point that we want this to be very much reflective of the conversation and the findings and the perspectives of everyone here. So we'll see how we can do that to the best of our abilities, and that might mean suggesting or identifying additional processes to work through some of the trickier governance and process questions that we haven't really engaged with yet, and which, as we've talked about, we're not really a body that can do that. But this has been super helpful. It has given us a good sense of where people are at. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our guests who have participated at various times in our meetings. I want to do a personal thank you to Chloe and to Natalie and to Monica, as well as our media services people who have provided ongoing support to our meetings, but Chloe, Natalie, and Monica, who have made this process run in a challenging environment and have helped produce, I think, excellent documents and reports. And I think that we have accomplished a lot with a very small team, but it's a testament to the talents of Chloe, Natalie, and Monica, and to all of your engagement that have allowed us to get here. And I hope the next few weeks we can get to something that will do what we've talked about and our goals, which are take advantage of opportunities that I think exist out there and amplify our work and improve our visibility and impact on public policy questions in ways that have an impact on communities and improve lives here in Toronto, across the country, and globally, and create deeper partnerships. So thank you to everybody, and we'll be looping back over the next couple of weeks. But with that, thank you, everyone, and stay well.